Hey, what's up, everybody? Tim Albrecht here, and welcome to this week's episode of the Ask a YFP CFP segment of the Your Financial Pharmacist Podcast, where we feature questions from you, the YFP community, to be answered by one of our very own fee-only certified financial planners. Please note this podcast is intended for educational purposes and should not be considered financial or investment advice, as we do not know all the variables to one's personal situation when answering a question. Before we jump into today's question, a shout out to our extraordinary YFP financial planning team that makes this segment possible. Your Financial Pharmacist offers fee-only comprehensive financial planning services that are customized to the pharmacy professional. So whether you want to pay off your student loans, make the right investment decisions, or simply build a solid financial plan, we'll help get your income working for you rather than the other way around. You can learn more by visiting yfpplanning.com. Again, that's yfpplanning.com. Okay, this week's question comes from Becca in Phoenix, Arizona.
Hi, this is Becca from Phoenix, Arizona, and I was wondering if there are significant benefits or downsides to refinancing my federal student loans. Is it better to go through a loan server or a bank?
Thank you, Becca, for submitting your question to be featured on this week's Ask a YFP CFP segment of the Your Financial Pharmacist Podcast. Tim Baker, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so this is obviously a big decision because we're seeing a lot of people that were like, I refinanced right before this freeze, and that wasn't necessarily the best idea. But it is one of those things that once you go through with a refi, it's irreversible. So just to back up, Tim, you can technically go through a refi with a loan servicer because there are loan servicers that handle both federal and private loans.
Right. But
just for context, typically a refi is where you have taken loans from the federal government or even a private company, and based on your income, your credit, all that stuff, you're going out into the market and you're saying, hey, I'm paying right now 6% on my $100,000. This is my income. This is my credit. Are there better rates out there? And you go and you shop, and YFP has a ton of resources and partners in this realm. And you go and you find a 5-year, a 7-year, a 10-year, a 15-year that are this and this rate with the appropriate term. So once you do that, once you meet the federal, so then that servicer basically cuts a check, pays off your federal loans, and now they hold the note and you're paying them, as we go. So once we do that, you are in the private sector. So you can't go back to the federal. So back in the day, and I always say this, is like when I first started advising clients on student loans, the prevailing thought was like, never do that. Never, ever do that, because of a lot of the protections that the federal government allows. So like hardship and, deferment, like the federal government, for the most part, will let you defer your loans for a long time because they are backed by the full faith and credit of the U.S. taxpayer, where a lot of these other companies that are for profit, they have to answer to, their projections and maybe shareholders and investors and things like that. So they can't be as forgiving in that regard. So that's one of the major things. Or if we go through a recession and they freeze interest payments or interest and payments, like you're typically not going to see that on the private side. So, if it's that you're not going to seek forgiveness, whether it's PSLF or non-PSLF forgiveness, and your rates are anywhere above 3%, this is a viable option to do, because a lot of these providers, they might not be as generous with some of the perks in federal loans, but they try their best to meet them. Another big one is a lot of private companies, they don't forgive the loans upon death and disability. That's a big thing if you don't have life insurance or you don't have disability insurance. So in the federal side of things, they do automatically. Now, a lot of the people that we work with, they do, not all of them. So you have to be cognizant of that. But that is, again, if it's not a forgiveness option, your rates are higher, it should be definitely something that you run to ground where you're getting quotes and you're saying, is this truly for me? What a lot of people don't know is that you can be forgiven outside of public service, and that is a viable option as well. That is still on the table, even though Fed Loan Servicing is no longer doing the PSLF. So all of that stuff is going to be dictated by your NSLDS file, which is not really held by any one servicer. It's really held, by the Department of Education. So that is all safe and set. But again, once you leave and go refi, it's a different ball game. So there are benefits. The benefits being better rate, better term, but there can potentially be downsides as well that you really have to, think through and observe before you make that decision.
Yeah, great summary, Tim. And I think the highlight between some of the differences between the federal and the private is important. And just to reinforce, one of the comments that you made, when I think about the decision tree to get to refinancing yay or nay, to your comment, the decision of is forgiveness even a viable option, that really has to be evaluated. Whether that's public service loan forgiveness or non-public service loan forgiveness, if that is on the table as an option, to highlight the point that you made, if we go the path of refinancing, we're making ourselves ineligible as that door being open anymore. And so I think that really evaluating and making sure, as we talk about often on the show when it comes to student loans, unfortunately, the hand we have been dealt is a system that probably is more complex than it needs to be. But that means we've got to really understand all the options that are out there before we can make an informed decision.
Well, and the other thing, Tim, that we haven't brought up that we should is just general forgiveness from the government. So like Biden has talked about,
yep,
and I don't think he wants to do any more than like 10, but I know a lot of his advisors are saying like forgive all of it or push for like 50,000, or the average is 30 or 35,000. So I know people are like kind of hanging around because if I have $100,000 of debt and maybe half of that's going to be forgiven, if I refinance that before that comes through, like I'm out. I refinance 100,000 into the private sector. I'm more than likely not getting that forgiven. If it's on the federal books, there could be a benefit that could be nothing, but it could be 10, 30. Who knows? I don't know if I'm holding my breath with that.
Right.
Again, don't look to me to be a prognosticator about anything, but it could be something that are real dollars that, you're holding out for as Biden kind of, works through his term here.
Yeah, and I'm with you, Tim. Like, I'm not going to hold my breath. I'm not going to try to crystal ball this, with the exception of one comment that I think that we're seeing a lot of discussion happen around this right now because of the pending end to the administrative forbearance, which, to your comment, we've talked about on the show before, is likely to be extended, and we'll keep an eye on that and obviously keep the community up to date, just based on the conversations in the news recently with Fed loan servicing and so forth. But I think it's one of those things that are worth considering and making sure that we're, of course, informed with what is going on. But who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? But I have a feeling that as the discussions are going on about extension, will that happen? Will it not happen? That perhaps the discussions around forgiveness are swirling around at the same time as well. So my hope is there's some clarity on this in the near future. But stay tuned, and we'll do our best to keep the community up to date. Becca, great stuff. Thank you for taking time to submit your question. We really appreciate it. As a small thank you, we're going to be sending you a super comfy YFP t-shirt. And to those listening, we'd like to feature your question on an upcoming episode. And you can submit that question by going to yourfinancialpharmacist.com/ask YFP, or you can send us an email at info@yourfinancialpharmacist.com. Have a great rest of your week.